Hello, I'm Susan Regan, host of Connecticut Valley Views. And my guest today is Megan Scanlon. She is the president and CEO of the Connecticut Coalition Against Domestic Violence. Megan, my first comment, is it not true that domestic violence is one of the greatest issues we face in our Connecticut communities today? And that is why I wanted to provide you with the opportunity for our viewers on those challenges and how your department is addressing the increasing concern. First, what is your role in the agency?
Well, thank you very much, Susan, for having me. Excited to be here and share some of what we do. My role as CEO is to oversee all of the strategic partnerships and the 18 sites that we have across the state and make sure that the services are high quality, make sure that we are also receiving the necessary funds to be able to run those services, whether they be federal, state, or private funds. And also really instrumental in shaping the statewide and federal policy when it comes to the voice of survivors across the state of Connecticut and using that voice at the federal level as well with our federal and state delegations. So that's just a little bit about the work. You had sort of mentioned, what do we see as the biggest issue? I mean, we see domestic violence in the state of Connecticut as a public health crisis that impacts 1 in 4 women, 1 in 7 men. That 1 in 4 women statistic is actually more than diabetes and heart disease combined. So, we think it's a really important issue that should be treated and dealt with in a very different way than I think we've treated it in the past.
So you would say then that your objectives and your mission statement then is to increase the value of life within the state of Connecticut for those families who are facing challenges not only on a fiscal basis, an emotional basis, a mental statement. And it truly is one of the, I think, most critical things we have to do because it leads to other things. I mean, domestic violence can occur because of drinking and drugs, and now we have marijuana, and obviously involving children who have had a terrible time over the past 2 years with COVID, being shut in, not being able to attend school, not being able to participate or socialize with their friends. But then it can go full circle because you could have a family that 5 years ago was well established, doing well, able to meet their obligations and so forth. But then it turns into a nightmare. And now they turn to drinking and drugs rather than drinking and drugs being the initial issue. So tell us, what is the status of domestic violence in Connecticut? Is there a percentage of the population? I know you mentioned, you said it was 1 in 4 for women and 1 in 7 for men, but could you identify out of the number of people that we have population, how many people are actually affected by this?
Sure. So, I think first and foremost, domestic violence, it's a complicated issue, and there's certainly every situation is really different. And so I do want to make sure that folks know that the services we provide are what we call trauma informed, and they're survivor driven. So they are going to be tailored to the specific situation that each survivor and their family finds themselves in. Connecticut has about 3 million people in the state of Connecticut. We serve about 40,000 individuals through our 18 sites per year. We run the statewide domestic violence resource hotline. We've had about 20,000 contacts over the last 2 years per year that we've seen in that regard. And we also know that those are only the people coming through our doors. So there are a lot of people that we are missing, that we are working to be able to make that outreach and that education and awareness available. So I think first and foremost, our mission is to build a Connecticut, build a world where no one lives in fear, right? So you think about your home, it's usually your safest place, your sanctuary. So we are really working very hard to address the fact that family violence is a public health crisis, just like gun violence and mental health and others. we are working very hard to get into communities, underserved communities, as well as non-traditional communities, to be able to educate and inform them of what domestic violence is and what it can look like within a relationship or within a family. So it's really, really important that when we talk about domestic violence, we are not just talking about intimate partner violence, between two intimate partners. We're talking about family violence and how that can occur in the home as well. I think to talk to your, reference to alcohol and drugs, I mean, we certainly see that there's an intersection between mental health and substance use. But oftentimes I think it's also used as a coping mechanism for those that are impacted by the trauma. So it's really important to understand that, the abuser or the offender is using over time a pattern of power and control in the relationship. So it's really important to realize that they may be coming to it from a variety of different angles. We certainly always talk about the fact that nobody is growing up saying, hey, I want to be a domestic violence offender or a domestic violence victim. That's not what's happening. Clearly, children who have witnessed it, as we know from some of the offender surveys that we've gone through, they have witnessed family violence or been subject to it as children, and then obviously perpetuate that sometimes in their young adult and adulthood. So I think the issue is just so much more complex than I think most people realize. It's not often as simple as physical abuse between two individuals. There is coercion that is emotional, like you said, psychological. There is financial abuse. There is oftentimes utilizing individuals' most prized possessions, whether it be their pets or their children, to perpetuate that power and control dynamic within the relationship.
Yes. Now it's interesting. You said underserved communities. Are we talking about cities such as Bridgeport and Hartford, New Haven, and Waterbury? Are the part of the demographics of to whom this seems to happen? Would you say that it comes from lower household incomes, where a driving force is lack of money, inability to meet one's obligations, and then this drives it? Would you say, or can we be looking at people who are in higher income brackets making a lot of money, but still there is the issue? I mean, is there a certain segment that you could identify that you see the most often?
Yeah, well, the actually interesting thing about domestic violence and why we really want to treat it as a public health crisis as we move forward is because it really does cut across socioeconomic status. So we can't necessarily point to one particular income level that is more subject to it. I mean, obviously, some of the murders that we've had in the state of Connecticut over the last several years have been from, families that are considered, I think, above the average income for the state of Connecticut, so above that $72,000 annual income that the state of Connecticut has for a household or a family of four. So we've certainly seen that. So it's not necessarily correlated to income. Certainly other stressors in the home. I mean, like any household that has stressors, whether it be financial, whether it be a child with special needs, whether it be anything that you're experiencing in your home that's obviously putting stressors on a household. If you also are experiencing family violence, intimate partner violence within that household, obviously things have a tendency to be more exacerbated. Things have a tendency to maybe get to a critical breaking point where you might want to seek services, not necessarily leave the situation. We often work with survivors that are not necessarily looking to leave the situation, but are looking for resources to help them gain independence, to get ready to leave, or to help their partner access resources so that the abuse stops. So I think that is also something that I don't know that necessarily everyone thinks about is in these cases. It's not necessarily that the victim wants to leave the situation. They really just want the abuse to stop in their home.
To be fixed, yes, of course. Would you say that you've seen the escalation occur since you have been in your position with the COVID 20 through 21, let's say, I think would be the height of it, where people are, I guess, trapped in their homes, are feeling more isolated, where children are not enjoying the normal growing socialization with their friends. Would you say COVID has had an impact on these challenges?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, one of the tactics that abusers often use is isolation, the tool of isolation, isolating from friends, family members over time. So, COVID actually sort of gave them a built-in tool to be able to utilize isolation in a much different way than we were used to in our society. So it certainly increased the instances of family violence and intimate partner violence. It certainly impacted the number of children that were witness to or exposed to themselves. The violence in the home because schools were shut down or other community programs that they might have utilized in the past were shut down or they were virtual for whatever reason. So we definitely are seeing the long-term impacts on children, and we certainly have taken steps to address that. Last session, we advocated for funding that would fund full-time family and child advocates across all of our 18 sites. And those individuals are specifically tasked with working with the children and non-offending parent in order to essentially get them access to counseling services, to whatever school supports they may need, whatever other community supports that they may need, and help them to better understand healthy relationships, and if and when necessary, depending on the situation, how they can set up healthy boundaries with the offender moving forward if that person is to have any kind of involvement in the child's life.
Yes. Well, with regard to the process, I guess, let's say, let's take what would be one of your more average or situation. Let's say that there is a woman, she is concerned, she has been isolated. Let's just go from the fact it's a woman. Her husband doesn't want her to see her friends, doesn't want her in contact with her family. He's threatened that he will hurt the children or her if she attempts to not follow his orders and so forth. Now there's fear, obviously, of retribution, either to the woman herself or the fear that a husband may do something to the children. Give us a sense of what would be the process if she feels, because a lot of times women don't want to report it to anybody outside the family. They can't talk to their mother or their sister or a friend or even a neighbor next door. Should they be going to the police first if he's threatened her with a gun, or should she be contacting your agency? And if in fact she does that, tell us what you do next. What is the process for handling the situation?
Sure. So I think it's important to realize, so if anybody is in like immediate danger, as you referenced the gun, then obviously calling the police is the right way to go. But if the individual in this situation or others, if you feel like you don't necessarily want to go to friends and family, totally understand. Or you may have been cut, to your point, you may have been you sort of cut off from communication with them and really struggling with how do you get back into communication with them. We have a 24/7 domestic violence resource hotline that covers the entire state. It's called CT Safe Connect. We have real live advocates that are available 24/7. It is free, it's confidential, and it's safe. And I think the most important piece of that is it's confidential. So you can call in and not even give us your name or very little information, and an advocate can sort of walk you through what you need to do next. So first and foremost, they'll sort of make sure that you're safety planning, what that may look like for you. In this case, safety planning around the threats that have been made, the gun that may be in the home, and other factors that may be at play. They will be able to connect you with one of our 18 sites if you do want to look at other services, if you do want to explore shelter services, if you do want to explore any kind of individual counseling. You don't necessarily have to go into shelter to access any of our services. So you can very much stay, within the community. We have other housing programs too, like our rapid rehousing, that would allow an individual to be able to get safely rehoused in an apartment or home. And we're able to help subsidize that for up to 2 years and work on an economic financial independence plan with that individual. So I guess what I would say is, the situation best. And I think obviously survivors, victims know their situation best. So if you've really gotten to the place where you feel like you have no one else to turn to and you don't feel safe, and that's something that I always ask individuals, do you feel safe? If the answer to that question is no, then pick up the phone or text or email or chat, because you can do it in any of those ways to our hotline, and just have that initial conversation with the advocate. You don't necessarily have to take any action that day. You can call back as many times as you need. You don't necessarily have to go and enter any services until you're ready. We really do let the individual take the lead on what he or she is ready to do and when. And we plan along the way so that if and when things escalate, we have a plan in place to be able to help. But I also would add, I don't want people to think that, if they don't have housing or they don't have any income or they have very little income, let's say the individual might be the either sole or major provider for the household, or they have children, none of those things are barriers to getting safe. So we have resources to be able to temporarily house you. We have resources to get the kids what they need. We have so many resources. And I think it's really important for individuals to understand that the barriers that they have in their head as to why they might not necessarily be able to make that leap or that change are not an issue. So our advocates have the ability to set all of those things up. Individuals that might have court involved in their situations, we have court advocates on both the criminal and the civil side that can help them navigate their different issues that they're dealing with within the court system, the justice system. And we also have a pro bono restraining order project where we can provide legal representation for that restraining order hearing free of charge. And we have a legal consult program for individuals that may not necessarily qualify for legal aid, but then also can't afford an attorney and do need some legal expert or lawyer to be able to at least sit with for an hour as they enter into any kind of family law proceedings, whether it be mediations or whether it be hearings. So we're able to provide so many resources that I can't emphasize that enough for individuals that feel like they're
That's
totally
excellent. Well, you talk about funding all of these things, and the fact is they're free and that you can support them, and even up to 2 years. That's very impressive. Give us just a brief overview of how funding works for you. There are some people out there who may say, I'd like to donate, or is there anything I can do? But you're state funded, and I believe you said you're federally funded. Give us an idea of, how that works and how often you see. I mean, can you ask for more if you see things escalating? Can you ask for more, or is it given on an annual basis?
So the budgets that we have are based on grants that we apply for, and based on an annual line item in the state budget. So we have one annual line item in the state budget. And then we've really built most of the programming through federal and state grant applications. So certainly nothing is guaranteed. And then we also are continuing to build out our private donations and philanthropy. So obviously any little bit helps, but we do all that to be able to provide everything free of charge. We don't necessarily have any income requirements like other programs might. And that's really important, I think, for individuals who may on paper have assets but have no access to that. So we clearly serve individuals that on paper have assets but have absolutely no access to them, and then the full spectrum from somebody that's really coming to shelter with what they have.
Sure. Well, as far as your interface goes, I mean, have you ever, let's say, in a situation where someone is in fear of what's going on and the police are called and they show up, do you work hand in hand with them? Do the police ever contact you to be at the scene of that? And we all know, and I think we've all heard, and I actually have spoken to a couple of different towns, and I find that the situations that incur domestic violence, not car wrecks or someone being held up or attacked or whatever, but domestic violence seems to be one of the most horrific scenes that you can be involved in. So then also, I guess I might ask, do you work with Child and Family Services? Has it been necessary to remove the children from the home? Give us a sense for your relationships with those areas who serve the community as well.
Yeah, so we have a really great relationship with law enforcement. We have a director of law enforcement services that does all of the trainings and education for law enforcement across the state, works with the state police as well as the 169 or so departments across the state. So I guess the short answer is, yeah, they are the most, they tend to be the most lethal calls, the most high danger calls that police can go to. So we make sure we do a lot of training and education and partnering throughout the year with law enforcement. We actually in the state of Connecticut have 100% participation in what is called the lethality assessment program. And it is a set of 11 questions that when an officer goes to a domestic violence call, they ask the individual, the victim, a set of 11 questions. If they screen in high danger, then they immediately get connected with an advocate. So the law enforcement officer will immediately connect them with one of our advocates throughout the state to be able to follow up and seek services. So that's sort of the process that we have set up. Obviously, in any situation, they have the ability to call us to sort of figure out, like, did I handle this well? What should the follow-up be? I mean, we're always a resource, and all of our 18 sites across the state have very good relationships with the police departments in their area. So we have done a lot of work to be able to do that. We still continue to do that work when it comes to our relationship with DCF. I think it's gotten much better over the last several years, but there's still a lot of work to do in terms of training caseworkers and others at DCF around intimate partner violence and family violence and how that may present. But I think we have been doing a very good job of partnering and working through some of that, especially as they have really experienced, staff turnover as well. And we have too, based on just all the nature of the pandemic.
Sure. Going back to the demographics, and I think you said 1 in 4 women suffer this situation at some point, and 1 in 7 men. When it comes to, we think of physical violence, men being supposedly stronger and so forth than women, but when it turns out to be a man, is it because he feels he's being harassed? Is it because she's threatened him with a gun? Give us a sense of that type of situation when he might report something. Is he in fear of his life, or is he just in fear of the quality of life that he's living?
No, I think it is. I think, men experience this just like women. Obviously, I think societally we have, there seems to be a little bit more acceptance of violence against women than the other way around. But no, the men that we serve come with very similar fears, similar stories. Obviously, some maybe more shame around their stories in some respects, and we look to house them, and we don't turn people away from our shelters based on gender or any race, gender, sexual orientation, any of that. So we are fully accommodating. We accept anybody into our program. So I mean, they would be treated with the same the same level of care and services, and often come with similar concerns. Again, I think the biggest hurdle for men is a different type of shame than women might experience in these situations. And then, we'll work with them same way that we would with a woman, making sure that we've gone through whether or not safety planning has been done, whether or not they need a protective order. But all of those things still apply. Custody
Certainly.
with children.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's basically it's saving the family altogether. The objective here is whoever is the issue, and I would imagine that occasionally you might even have a child report the issue, a young person who feels as though mom and dad aren't getting along, and who could I call? So, having said that, give us the contact information if you'd like to give a phone number, or give the website if you would, so that people either who have interest in knowing more about this or who are seeking help, what is the contact information you would like to supply?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, if people are seeking help and services and want to talk to an advocate when they call or text or email or chat, going to our website, ctsafeconnect.org, is a great first step. And the phone number that they can either call or text is 888-774-2900. If you want to learn more about CCADV and the other resources we have, especially if you are a friend or family member, I could not emphasize enough going to our website, which is ctcadv.org, because it gives you so many different resources, from what is DV to what can I do as a bystander in this situation, to how can I get involved in some of the advocacy work that we're doing across the state. So whether you're just interested in the movement or are in need of services, either immediately or eventually, those are the two resources that I would recommend.
That's wonderful. Well, I hope we've given you the opportunity to express what you can provide to the community, to families in need who need help. And been a delight to talk to you. The half hour goes by pretty quickly.
It does, yeah.
Yeah. So I really appreciate your time. I know you're busy serving this community. So thank you so much. And I'd like to remind all of our viewers that you will be able to see this program on our website, CT Valley Views, and all the rest of our programs that we hope to inform people about high-profile people and high-profile topics in Connecticut. So thank you for joining me today with my guest, Megan Scanlon. We appreciate your time as well as our guest time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan. Thanks for having me.